You got to remember that the automotive industry supports the rest of the economy. The rule of thumb is for every job in the auto industry, it supports about 7 other jobs in the rest of the economy.
All right, so what is the future of the auto industry? Let's ask John McElroy, longtime automotive journalist, host of Autoline on Detroit Public Television. John, it's great to see you.
Thanks, Christy. Good to be with you.
You know what? You've seen strikes, you've seen mergers, you've seen bankruptcies. How would you compare all of those to a global disruption and a pandemic like this and what we're seeing happen to the auto industry?
Boy, mix all that together, throw in a recession, throw in a depression, and you got what we're into right now. We have never seen anything like this in the automotive industry. I mean, even if you go back to the Great Depression in the 1930s, that took several years to roll out. We have seen the entire global economy just come to a screeching halt in a matter of weeks. This is unprecedented.
So now we have the plants are going to be opening back up again, the slow roll and the start. What is this really going to look like? And how can the companies get back up to a level of production that they were at when everything stopped?
Well, getting back to a level like before is going to be dictated by whether or not people are buying cars and trucks in the numbers that they did before. That's not going to happen. We know for a fact there's going to be a huge drop-off in sales, if only because if you look at the daily rental companies, the Hertz's, the Avis's, the Enterprise, and the like, with so little travel going around the country right now, I mean, Hertz is teetering on the brink. It may not make it through this. And you got to remember that the daily rental companies buy almost 2 million vehicles every year, just in the U.S. market. So take them out, and we've already seen a huge drop in what we're going to be coming back to. But having said all that, we know what's going to happen in the plants because China has been back at work for nearly 2 months now. Europe is a few weeks ahead of us. And all we have to do is look at what's going on there to know what's going to happen here. And it's everything you already know about. Wear a mask, get thermally scanned before you go into a plant, maintain social distancing, put up barriers between different workstations, wipe down work areas 3 times a shift, stagger the shifts and have the shifts come in through different doors so people don't walk by each other. That's what it's going to take.
So you talked about you talked about the rental car industry and the fact that they're not going to be buying as much. What is the appetite for the regular consumer right now in terms of cars and trucks?
Well, it depends on the consumer, of course. You have a lot of people whose leases are up, and what the car companies are trying to do is get them to extend those leases right now. Because as a car comes off lease, it goes into the used car market, and we've seen an absolute collapse in the prices of used cars. That'll probably come back some later in the year, but right now they don't want those vehicles back. Nonetheless, those owners or the people who have leased them are going to want something new. There are other people. I'll give you a great example. My own daughter has a 10-year-old car. She's telling me, Dad, it's time to get a new one. So she's definitely in the market for a new vehicle as well. But for a lot of people, boy, they're going to watch and see what's really going to happen with the economy right now. Are they even going to have a job? Or are they going to have to take a pay cut for a longer period than what they thought? So much uncertainty out there. My gut feel tells me we'll see about 80% of the market come back relatively quickly, but that still leaves a big hole in the marketplace.
All right, so if you're these global automakers who are looking at spending money on innovation, looking at some of the electric vehicles and some of the larger projects that were coming down the road and autonomous vehicles, where are you now in terms of where your cash flow is and what you're investing in and what you're pulling back on?
Yeah, automakers are going to call it on a product line by product line basis. Number one is crank up the production on those vehicles where you can make big profits. Full-size pickup trucks, full-size SUVs. That's where there's going to be so much concentration right now because these companies are desperate to try to get revenue coming through the door. Electric vehicles, very interestingly, it's on a case-by-case company by a company. So we've seen Ford already announce that it's canceling an electric Lincoln that it was going to do in conjunction with the startup Rivian. Meanwhile, General Motors says, no, we're not cutting anything with our electric vehicles. It's full steam ahead. When it comes to autonomous vehicles, GM says, hey, look, our Cruise automation, GM Cruise, very well funded. Nothing has to get cut. But I think other automakers who may not have as much outside funding for their autonomous vehicles may put that on the back burner for right now, because you're not going to make any money off it for years to come. So that's going to be one of the first casualties of this pandemic.
Let's look a little bit about support, or talking about possibly another bailout for the auto industry. There's already talk going on in Washington right now. What kind of incentivizing or what kind of help can we give autos? Are we going to see that kind of help again, or what are you hearing?
Look, I'm reading the same things that you're doing, and it's especially the Michigan contingent in Washington that's pushing for some sort of incentive, some sort of financial help. I think it's inevitable. You got to remember that the automotive industry supports the rest of the economy. The rule of thumb is for every job in the auto industry, it supports about 7 other jobs in the rest of the economy. So if you want to get the American economy rolling again, you got to get the auto industry rolling, and vice versa. So we'll have to see what happens. I think there could be a number of people in the public who are going to say, look, we bailed those guys out a decade ago. The heck with them. Let them just, sink or swim. But I think cooler heads will prevail. You lose the auto industry, man, there's no way that this economy is going to recover. And that's why I think there's going to be some sort of incentives for consumers, for dealers, for suppliers, and for automakers.
Yeah, we talk about, you said for every job, there's 7 other jobs that are affected. In Michigan, we've talked so much in the last 20 years about diversifying our economy, not relying so much on automotive. But yet, do you believe that in numbers wise, aren't we still really tied to the success of auto?
I mean, it's great to talk about diversifying the economy, and it is necessary. But when you have a General Motors, a Ford, an FCA, and by the way, too, Toyota with a massive engineering complex, with Nissan here, with Hyundai Kia here, it's just hard to make them a smaller part of the Michigan economy because they're just such big companies. And I'm not even mentioning the giant supplier companies that we have in this state either. So let's go for diversification. But like I said, it's hard to make automotive a small part of that pie.
All right. So what should we be looking for this first week back in production? Anything that we should be watching for?
I don't think there's going to be any surprises. I believe it's going to start out very slow. It's going to be, and you've heard about this, if the plant was on 2 shifts, it'll go to 1 shift. If it was on 3, it'll go to 2. They're not going to bring everything back up at once. They've got to fill the pipeline. Suppliers are starting a week ahead of the automakers, because you cannot start an assembly line until every single part and component is laid out on the line. And you better have a shift worth of components there before you really start to crank the line up. So it'll come slowly. It'll take weeks to build. What the automakers seem to be hoping is that sometime in the early fall, they'll be back to normal line speed. But as I said earlier, sales are just not going to be what they were before this pandemic hit.
You can find more at onedetroitpbs.org or subscribe to our social media channels and sign up for our One Detroit newsletter.